Cordially welcome at the Center for Historical Research of the Polish Academy of Sciences in Berlin on behalf of our center and the Marc Bloch Center in Berlin and in Prague as well. I'm welcoming you also on behalf of Ewa Tatakowski, who is the spiritus movens or spiritus rectus of the whole conference project. Ewa, thank you so much for bringing us here together. Well, we decided at the very beginning to welcome you very cordially here at the Majakowski 47, and I'd like to start my greetings with a short presentation of the Center for Historical Research of Berlin. So it's going to take approximately 15 minutes, and then Jay and Mateusz are going to say their welcome. Okay, where we are actually and what we are doing here at the Center for Historical Research. Thank you, Marc. Well, the Center for Historical Research of the Polish Academy of Sciences is a part of the network of similar centers of the Polish Academy of Sciences abroad. We have similar centers in Rome, Paris, Vienna, Brussels, and Kiev. That's what makes different. Our Center for Historical Research of the Polish Academy of Sciences is our profile. So we are doing here, of course, history, because other centers of the Polish Academy of Sciences are more like the embassies of the Polish Academy of Sciences abroad. And the Center for Historical Research in Berlin is modeled rather on the German Historical Institute in Warsaw, or is to some extent similar to the St. Marc Bloch Center in Berlin and in Prague as well. So history and the multidisciplinary approach to history is something which is a very important feature of our center. And the last point I'd like to draw your attention to is quite important. It sounds, well, very obvious, perhaps. Nonetheless, I'd like to stress it. Promotion of the reconciliation and rapprochement between Poles and Germans, and since 2022, since the outbreak of the full-scale war in Ukraine, also a promotion of the reconciliation between Poland and Ukraine. We've got 10 people working here, 6 researchers, and the rest is the staff supporting us. But among us, we can see actually more co-workers of the Center for Historical Research. So Piotr, Filipkowski, Zosia Wójcicka, Mariusz Sariusz-Wolska, who would join us tomorrow. All these our friends had been working here for a long time before. Why the Center for Historical Research of the Polish Academy of Sciences is at the knee of this conference. I'd like to just briefly present you our flagship project, which was run by the former director of our center, Robert Traba, and this is Deutsch-Polnische Erinnerungsort, polsko-niemieckie miejsca pamięci, altogether 9 volumes of the Polish-German realms of memory, which were based and inspired to some extent by the Deutsche Erinnerungsorte, so the German realms of memory published by Etienne François and Hagen Schulze. Etienne François was the founder of the Marc Center Bloch in Berlin. Another very important project, flagship project, I would say, of us is the common Polish-German textbook for history. This is the second transnational textbook for history within the European Union, which was modeled to some extent, at least, on the similar Franco-German textbook for history called Histoire Geschichte. Well, after we finished the textbook project, the very last volume came out 2020. We decided, okay, a short technical break. Nonetheless, I'm going to continue. We decided to gather our experiences from two textbook projects, so the Histoire Geschichte and Europe, Our History. And we organized two quite important conferences in Paris. The second one was again supported by and co-organized by Eva Tartakowski. And this is something which we are very proud of, and which was also inspiring for other textbooks, transnational textbooks in Europe. So just next week we are going to launch a similar Polish-Ukrainian textbook for history in Warsaw at the Congress of the Polish and Ukrainian historians there, based on our experiences from the German-Polish textbook for history. What is also quite important as far as this project is concerned, I'd like to show you actually two volumes have appeared. This is the first one, edited again by Eva Tartakowski. She's making face now, but thank you, Eva, very much. Which is, to some extent, at least a conference volume gathering all important papers from the conference we organized in Paris about the transnational textbooks for history. Marku, could you please switch to the next slide? Yeah, the next one, and the next one. So we've been in touch with many people in charge of similar textbooks or auxiliary materials for history. This is one example only. So we had been invited 2017 to work with the teachers, history teachers from Kosovo on this handbook for teaching the Holocaust in cooperation with Yad Vashem and House, the Wannsee Conference in Berlin, with support of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Next one, Marek, please. I would address you to switch the slides, okay? But we have also published handbooks for history, which are addressed to the academic teachers, to the students of history in the German-speaking countries, and this is a 4-volume edition of Poland in European history, and this is a quite important project for us, how we here at the Center for Historical Research define the Polish history. Namely, the Polish history is not the history of the Polish people, of the Poles. The Polish history is the history of all ethnic groups which have inhabited the Polish-Lithuanian territories for 1,000 years. So we are trying to be very inclusive in our definition of the Polish history. Next one, Marek, please. Well, we are quite proud of this project, which was run actually by Zofia Wójcicka, who is among us, and Ancestry, Remembering and Social Cohesion in Transnational Europe. unrest. Briefly, this project was carried out in the framework of the Horizon program of the European Union, and we had been working on that for 4 years here altogether, and one of the most publications I put here on the slide. The next one, please. Altogether, we run here 4 bigger publication series. 2 of those at Brill de Gruyter, and 2 others together with the Polish publishing houses. Next one. And just some selected examples of the publication from this 4 series. Knowledge in the Shadow of Catastrophe, Key Thinkers of Polish Humanities in the Post-War era, a collection of very important essays and papers published so far only in Polish. Piotr Filipkowski and his colleagues translated it into English and edited it in our publication series, Poland in Europe, at Brill. Next one, please. I said Ukraine. Well, among others, we published this very important book by Grzegorz Motyka, one of the best experts in Poland on the Ukrainian history of the 20th century, from the Volhynian massacre to Operation of Vistula, covering 2 very dramatic chapters of the Polish-Ukrainian relations in the 20th century. The next one. Well, the Polish-German reconciliation in the broader perspective of the European integration is for us also very important. That's why we decided to launch 4 years ago this series, Breakthroughs and People of Dialogue, from the history of Polish-German agreement. This is one of the volumes which is dedicated to Władysław Bartoszewski, a very acknowledged figure in the Polish-German relations and in the Polish-German reconciliation project after World War II. The next one, Marc. Sources and studies on German-Polish relations in the early modern period in the 19th century. Again, I'm getting back to our main assumption. Polish history is not the history of the Polish people only and exclusively. That's why we're trying also to show the German contribution, the contribution of the German culture, the contribution of the German language to the Polish-Lithuanian culture in the early modern period and also in the 19th century. The next one. Well, this is the 2nd volume of this new mini publication of a series, which is called Ukraine, Poland, Germany, Triangle of Dialogue, which we publish in cooperation, among others, with the Ukrainian Free University in Munich. And we are trying to publish this series additionally in English, but mainly in 3 languages. So German, Polish and Ukrainian as well, which is a huge challenge. And Jakub Sawicki, who is here among us, hi Jakub, is in charge of this series. We are quite proud that now, just 2 weeks ago, the 2nd volume of this mini-series came out, which is dedicated to Bogdan Osapczuk, the pioneer of the Polish Ukrainian reconciliation, who spent most of his time here in Berlin, or in West Berlin, to be specific. The next one. Polish, German, and Austrian Jews and the modern idea of Israel. This is a series which we started, unfortunately, briefly before the 7th of October. But nonetheless, we are trying to publish here short essays on the most important persons which created the idea of the Eretz Israel. The mini-series published in English, but the next volume is going to be published in Polish and Hebrew as well. Okay. well, the environmental history. This is also something very important for us. Piotr Filipkowski contributed immensely to this project, Perspectives on Public Policy and Societal Environmental Crisis, and this is the volume we published together with, Piotr, remind me, with which university? With Max Planck Institute in Leipzig. The next one, please. We publish also a yearbook, which is called Please in Plural, Histories, not history, but histories, which is also quite telling for our multidisciplinary approach here. The next one, please. Who is reading today books? Well, there are some people still which read paper editions. Nonetheless, we decided to create, also to set up also an online portal for history, which is called CB Hist EU, and we published on this portal translation of historical sources regarding Polish-German relations, e-books. We started to podcast a series, and we do also online exhibitions. Next one, Marc, please. The cooperation with Ukraine is absolutely crucial for us from 2022, and that's why we have contributed, or we co-curated this exhibition, Ukraine War in Europe, which was mainly created by the Institute of Ukrainian Remembrance in Kiev. But we, as a Polish institution, we were in charge of the German language version of this exhibition, so we are quite proud of it, and we had been prized for a good quality of the translation. The next one, please. Our other exhibitions, because we are active not only in Germany, not only in this between France, Germany, Ukraine, but we are trying to be also quite active in Poland, and our two exhibitions we had done 2 years ago, and this year this one, Nigra Cruz Mala Cruz, is about the history of the Teutonic Order and, well, the remembrance, collective remembrance of the Teutonic Order history in Poland and in Germany. But what is really very, very important, and what happened just 2 months ago was the opening of the next exhibition, Nasi Chłopcy. Our boys, unsere Jungs, so 37 million posts altogether appeared on internet, protesting, criticizing us. Well, at least half of those were very critical about this exhibition. And this exhibition is about something which is the similar phenomenon, which is similar to the malgré nous. So the Polish young men, which were compulsorily drafted into the Wehrmacht, the German army during World War II, about 400,000 Poles served in the German army during World War II. Many of them deserted and joined the Polish forces fighting against the Nazi Germany. So 36% of the Polish forces fighting against the Germany in west of Europe was composed of those who deserted from the Wehrmacht. And this exhibition showed a very important phenomenon for the Polish culture of remembrance. How much the Polish culture of memory is concentrated on Warsaw, is centralized, and how much such topics as this one have been taboo for almost 80 years after 1945. Next one, please. Actually, we have many other activities and publications, but I need to stick to the time. And well, still, I hope that we have still like 15 minutes at a time or 10 minutes at a time for your talks. Dear Jay, dear Mateusz, thank you very much and have a good stay here, very fruitful of a discussion. You are among friends, and I'm so glad that we could, again, we are owing it to Eva, that we could renew our cooperation between Center for Historical Research and Marc Bloch of Sound. Thank you very much.
So I'll start by saying just that it's a great pleasure to be here, to be able to say a few words of welcome here in this lovely institute. In this conference, which brings together scholars, I think I counted all the nationalities from France, Poland, Germany, Canada, Belgium, and Italy. So it's a truly international conference, which is why probably I missed a country or two. Slovakia. Okay, sorry. I thought I counted them all. In any case, it's exactly the type of intellectual gathering that I feel comfortable with, because it's something that we do very similarly at the Centre Marc Bloch, which is why when I was contacted by Eva, I immediately I've known Eva a little bit from the past, and it's something that is actually at the heart of what we do, not only the very international aspect, but also bringing together perspectives from many disciplines. That's something as well which is characteristic of the Centre Marc Bloch. We cover, we're less history focused, although history forms sort of the backbone, the historical backbone. It was mentioned earlier that Etienne François was the founder, or one of the co-founders of the Centre Marc Bloch, so we have this very strong historical tradition, which is kind of the pivot of the interdisciplinary research that we try to conduct at the Centre Marc Bloch. Other things that are very similar to what we do, where I feel very comfortable being here, is the not just the Franco-German perspective, but also the European perspective. So the Centre Marc Bloch as well has gone from kind of actually very early on, it was not just binational, it was already sort of an outpost in the 1990s for people wanting to study Poland, wanting to study the former Soviet Union, on all the way into the Balkans. So it's something that a Franco-German perspective with always a European perspective, and also looking towards the East. It's also the support of initiatives coming from younger scholars, which is Eva's case, but it's also something that we try to promote at the Centre Marc Bloch. And last but not least, even though we're not a purely historical research center, we always try to embed historical context, historical trajectories into any type of study that we do. I was very interested by the fact that there's environmental history. We have that as well. And so that's something which is always fundamental in studying objects in the contemporary time period. So the actual central theme of the conference is also deeply rooted in traditions of the Centre Marc Bloch, with, we had Etienne François, who is still active. And we've had over the years a great deal of work on history, memory, on Franco-German reconciliation questions, and going beyond into a broader European perspective. I also wanted to underline that the conference is a concrete example of the excellent relations that we have with the CNRS. We have been working over the past few years, 2 years, Mateusz and I. And in fact, on Wednesday, we'll both be traveling to Warsaw for another conference, this time centered on a group of Ukrainian fellows supported by the French, by the Foreign Affairs, by the CNRS, a whole series of funders. And together with our colleague Laure Delcourt, who some of you might know, who's the director of the newly founded IRECA, which is kind of the Warsaw equivalent of the CNRS and the Centre Marc Bloch, so these French research centers abroad. We put together quite a nice conference, which we'll both attend on Thursday and Friday. One thing that is new for me is getting to know Igor and the Center for Historical Research of the Polish Academy. It's a research center which somehow wasn't at all on my radar screen until now, even though I've been here for 2 years. And so Igor and I had a long talk a couple of weeks ago to talk about logistics, but then we spilled over into common interests. So I think there are quite a few things that we'd like to develop together of mutual interest. So this was also, thank you, Eva, for kind of bringing us together. So I won't be any longer. I really look forward to the perspectives developed in this workshop, which are more essential than ever. I'll pass this microphone over. Because we're in a world that's increasingly conflict-ridden, a world where conflicts over the past and which manipulate and mobilize the past are ever present, but we also have in this conference examples where studying the past and memorial projects also are perhaps tools to bring people together and for forms of reconciliation, which is dear to us in the Franco-German perspective, which is dear to us in the more recent, in the German-Polish perspective, and which I think will be essential going forward. And if it's not going to sound very politically correct, but I think that in the long term, it's also up to us academics to rebuild bridges with Russia, because if we want to have some kind of a common history, which is not just along redrawn battle lines, then I think it's also our goal, part of our mission, to somehow restart some type of dialogue with colleagues in Russia, even though that's very difficult for the time being. So I'll pass the word to Mateusz.
Thank you so very much. Can I just simply take this one as it was? Thank you so very much. Chers et chers collègues, dear colleagues, Szanowni Państwo, it's my great pleasure to finish this introductory part by the usual but very important expression of gratitude to Ewa Tartakowski, to Igor Kąkolewski, and to Rowell and all the organizers of the event in the name of the French Research Center in Humanities and Social Sciences in Prague. That I've got the pleasure to be the chair of for some time. I need to underline maybe one disclaimer as to me as a Polish citizen and alumnus of the University of Warsaw, the existence of the historical centers of the Polish Academy of Sciences was pretty obvious since decades on the one hand, but on the other, as director of CEFRES, this is, I guess, an absolute premiere that we collaborate all together in organizing an event. And I'm very thankful to Eva for that, for putting it together also. And maybe one precision, not to repeat the elements that have been already given to you, the specificity of what we are, there are some slight differences, even if there's much in common between the historical centers of the Polish Academy of Sciences and what we do in the French research institutes abroad. It is that we are both funded by the equivalent of the French Polish Academy of Sciences, which is CNRS, and we are also a part of the French diplomatic network. All 27 of you, which is the Centre Bloch in Berlin, which is the CEFRES in Prague, which also will be from September on the new institute Jay mentioned that is founded, that has been founded and will be developing its activities in Warsaw at Dobra at the University of Warsaw to work with Eastern European studies. And therefore, our engagement is double. It's not only to develop interdisciplinary research all around the globe with the 27 institutes, but also to engage in projects of social and political importance, which perhaps the most spectacular one in the recent years was a program of non-residential scholarships to Ukrainian researchers. We've supported over 70 scholars in total in the last 3 years for over 200,000 euros, jointly in Prague, in Berlin, and now with the center in Warsaw in collaboration with Max Weber Stiftung from this year on. So how to say European alliances and synergies, not only on scientific level, but also on political level, in important cases, are very dear to our hearts. Maybe 2 words on a more CEFRES basis to complete this perspective. As some of you know, in our case, it was Marie-Elisabeth Ducreux that is the founding mother of CEFRES, so historical research, but mainly focused on modern times, was one of the pivot elements of the politics of CEFRES in the last 30 years. But still, memory stakes, as the ones discussed currently, are pretty important to us. Big research has been developed by Michel Bosson, some of you know, but also by Joanna, her Czech colleague that happened to obtain a starting ERC grant on a big project, Memory and Populism from Below, observing populism and memory stakes in different intercultural regions, just to resonate with elements that you have given to us, that is currently being developed at the Czech Academy of Sciences in collaboration with CEFRES. And two elements, if we are at multi-culti and interdisciplinary, we are 12 nationalities, 25 permanent members, 100 associated ones, working only in 3 interdisciplinary research areas in Prague. Shall you have any questions about the European grants incubators or postdoctoral or PhD positions we develop, I will be happy to answer any of you. But perhaps the focus is a bit bigger on social sciences, political sciences, anthropology in our case, with big projects developed in women's trajectories and the history of feminist movements in Central Europe, with 3 big conferences in the last years, a second one on Central European masculinities, which are perhaps a subject to be discussed for some reason, I don't know, recently, and a big project developed with Berlin also on contested energy transitions. So Europe is the key. This would be my last words, and I wish you wonderful exchanges in the next 2 days. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Jay and Mateusz. And we are going to start the first session today, and I'm going to chair the session between oral archives, emotions and traumas, contemporary issues in social memory in Eastern Europe. And I'd like to ask the speakers of this panel to come to the table, to join me at the table. So please come over, and I'm going only to swap the seats with you. Jascha, yeah. Just a second. Piotr is supporting us because he's co-hosting anyway this conference as a former researcher at the Center for Historical Research. Wonderful. Thank you. Joasiu, podejdź do Marka i przekaż to Markowi, albo Zosia to zrobi. Może podejdź tam. Just a second. We are still putting the presentations on the desktop. And well, this is an announcement of all of you. If you have brought your PowerPoint presentations, please go to Marek. So Mark is sitting just behind. He raised now. This is our technical support, but Mark is not only a technical support. He's something more important for us. We've been cooperating for many years together. Marek is also a journalist, is also a TV reporter involved in many very important projects in Ukraine, in Africa, in Asia, and he's always ready to help us. Thank you so much, Marc. Yeah. Okay. Now I think that we can start. Okay, and it's my pleasure to welcome here Piotr Filipkowski, Joanna Wawrzyniak, and Krzysztof Florek, and last but not least, Joanna Urbanek, who will join us in a second. Let me present briefly our speakers. So Piotr Filipkowski is a sociologist. He studied law at the University of Warsaw. I'd like to stress, he studied law at the University of Warsaw, and then he decided to do sociology and history. Thank you, Piotr, for this decision and supporting our research here at the Center for Historical Research. He now he works now at the Institute of Philosophy and Sociology of the Polish Academy of Sciences in Warsaw, not in Berlin, like you have here on the program. What is important, one of his most important project was his PhD project on the biographical memory of Polish prisoners of German Nazi concentration camps. And for his PhD dissertation, he received the Stanisław Ossowski, very prominent award in Poland. And now, also important information, Piotr is a co-founder of the Oral History Archive in Poland, which is like one of the most institutions conducting and research and archivizing oral history documents. Among his many publications, I've chosen only one which corresponds to his today's talk. This is the English translation of his book, so his dissertation, Oral History and the War, the Nazi Concentration Camp Experience in a Biographical Narrative Perspective, which appeared 2019 at the Peter Lang Publishing House. Piotr, go ahead.
Thank you very much for this generous introduction. It's a burden now to speak a bit, but okay, I will try. I will start with something that you showed 5 minutes ago, namely the picture with the mentioning exhibition "Our Boys, Nasi Chłopcy," which to me is a good example of kind of failure of some ambitions of oral history in Poland. Against collective memory. Of course, there is a tension and the question how to define oral history, biographical memory, individual experience-oriented research within collective memory frame or memory frame generally understood sociologically as collective memory. There are a lot of discussions, or were a lot of discussions around this. We don't have to recall them, but it's good to be aware of this. Is collective memory an umbrella term for everything, including historiography, archival research, and any other reference to the past that we in our societies do in whatever roles we are, or it's something more specific? I would claim for something more specific, then you need to define oral history against it or as a part of it, partly but not fully. And why this example is so telling to me, because for someone who conducted oral history interviews in Poland in the last years, it's kind of obvious that there were Poles who were in Wehrmacht, as there were many thousands of idiosyncratic biographical paths, and this is not that idiosyncratic, as you said. It's for 400,000. So it's some kind of basic knowledge for every conscious oral historian in Poland, And suddenly, or not so unexpectedly, I don't know, this became a kind of scandal. And this shows that it's something doesn't work. There is no transmission between oral history as a social movement, as academic activity, as an attempt to be more sensitive, more nuanced, more delicate and sophisticated maybe when interpreting the past, and for sure more tolerant and more open. And what is being done with the past by, I don't know, historians, musealists, but who have, or I don't know, journalists or whoever more, who have impact on teachers, educators, politicians, everyone who is in a role of referring to history somehow from above and telling people how to remember, how to react, that this becomes such a scandal that, okay, people in internet, they tell whatever they want without any responsibility, but to this kind of attack, I haven't followed it very carefully, but I grasped that even Museum for Warsaw Uprising had a moment when they published a picture of a young upriser, and with these are our boys or something like that. So, and this is kind of, I cannot really get it, because they also have an oral history archive, one of the biggest. In Poland, and of course I'm not claiming that everyone that has oral history archive is clever and responsible and sophisticated, but we could expect at least reluctant to engage into this kind of memory wars. So these very examples makes me less optimistic that we started today, that there is that something doesn't work in this transmission between the huge work that has been done kind of spontaneously, so there is no big glory for those who were engaged in that, and they had a lot of intellectual, I don't know, or any other pleasure and satisfaction of this work as oral historians or biographical sociologists, as these two approaches go close together in Poland much more than in Germany. I will come back to that in a second. This is a very vivid and fresh example, but there are of course more. That there is a kind of misuse or wrong use or no use of the huge oral history work that has been done in Poland, and this work has started roughly 25, 30 years ago. I had a chance to work at the Carta Center back then in early 2000, and this was an institution which was one of the first, maybe not first, but one of the first in Poland to engage in big oral history projects, also international projects with kind of carefully chosen methodology with some theoretical background. They started in the 80s already with so-called Eastern Archive, documenting biographies of people repressed in Soviet Russia during the war and after. And so this was a kind of intervention from below by dissident organization, first illegal, then legal, in kind of activity against oblivion by official historiography. That how it was defined, and this kind of imprint of intervention against oblivion or neglect by official historiography was there in Polish oral history from the very beginning. So it kind of influenced its shape, at least at the beginning. So it was close in a way to political history and not to social history, like in many Western countries, especially European countries. And the second characteristic, that from very beginning it was more archival activity. So the core energy went into collecting documentation, interviews as a historical collective memory source, as individual biography as a kind of cultural artifact to be studied, to be preserved, to be saved as a kind of also evidence as a proof of some historical processes, experiences which were claimed to be neglected. So this archival moment, this political or counter-historical moment is important in development of Polish oral history. And then there is influence of this Western tradition when we entered them in 2000. This was already kind of big history behind that. American oral history tradition, British and European one, some French influence as well, Daniel Berthaud. I was even a student of him by chance at the PhD program. At that time, I didn't have much experience in conducting oral history, but he then was an important reference for some part of Polish oral history as well. But much more German names, Lutz Niethammer, who died recently, and his influence, Alexander von Plato. But also German sociologist Fritz Schütze, who is maybe most quoted, being not historian, not oral historian, but most quoted German name in Polish oral history field, because as Polish biographical qualitative sociology has strong tradition of individual documentation, not necessarily oral one, but somehow there was a maybe not natural, but socially natural, let's say, connection, and this way Polish oral history was very much influenced by this narratological influences from Germany, like Fritz Schütze, Gabriel Rosenthal, and others. So with the careful study of individual interview, individual text, written text of the audio interview, with a careful or at least attempt to be carefully analytical about narrative structures, and trying to grasp some because for this narratological approach didn't mean that neglect of the real experience, whatever it is, but with this belief that through careful analysis of language you can get to some authenticity of the experience. So it is not postmodern, narratological only, playing on the surface of language. It's more kind of hermeneutical, deep-going attempt to go deep into analysis of experience, of individual memory. So, and with the mention Lutz Niethammer in influence of rather Freudian thinking of the memory and not Halbwaxian one. So there is these are just like brief references I'm doing here, kind of sketching kind of theoretical map of Polish oral history, which is fragmented, which is amalgamatic, which is not consistent, but which is rich somehow and gives potential, or could give potential for many different theoretical analytical approaches. And still this potential is there in the thousands of interviews that has been gathered. The archive where I work has today, I don't know, 6,000 interviews, but the number is not that important maybe. And there are variety of biographies. It's not focused thematically on any topic. Mentioned, I don't know, Museum of Warsaw Uprising has thousands of interviews with soldiers and civilians of Warsaw who experience and remember. But as in many archives, a biographical approach was adopted, then of course all these stories are much more than around the topic that particular museum or institution is focused on. There is Polin Museum documenting history of Polish Jews. There is access to visual history archive, this famous so-called Spielberg archive with over 50,000 video interviews with Holocaust, mostly Holocaust survivors, among them roughly 1,500 Polish survivors. Again, the term survivor is crucial here. This is part of, and it's what I'm telling about Poland is not maybe that peculiar for it develops somehow similar in Eastern Europe, in Czech or in Ukraine before the war, and now there are many projects also in our institute documenting here and now of the war by individual testimonies. So words like survival testimony, they connect this oral history work with very special approach, where not so much the eyewitness category is used as someone who was there and can, let's say, objectively or quasi-objectively refer what happened, but who survived or went through deeply biographically. Of course, there is a question of Polish-Jewish relations, Polish anti-Semitic attitude. Again, this could be another example. I started with this nasi chłopcy, but this could be so many museums work with Polish-Jewish history on one hand, using oral history, and still it's not. Sometimes it seems to be getting better, and sometimes seems to go worse, and depending what this or another politician does, or what someone publishes, and how many people support this or that. So. Altogether, there are many institutions. There are hundreds of thousands or dozens of thousands, at least, interviews being conducted in Poland in the last 30 years. There are a lot of projects. There are a lot of. There is Polish Oral History Association. Tomorrow, I'm going to Krakow for the International Oral History Conference with 400 people from 55 countries. There is a serious academic journal, Wrocławski Rocznik, Wrocław Yearly of Oral History, or for Oral History. All that shows kind of maturation of the field, its diversity, its kind of theoretical sophistication, methodological sensitivity. But there are people doing local history, there are people doing political history, there are people doing kind of official history in institutions like Institute for National Remembrance or Pilecki Institute. There are people trying to do gender history by oral history, I don't know, art history by oral history, etc. Or kind of traditional social history, the project Joanna did with also my collaboration, and a very good book was published on history of transformation, which is an attempt to, and finally the form as a book, it's more like in a way collection of sources with big commentaries. So it's also very delicate intervention into the very polarized and simplified discourse of transformation, and I think it's a kind of honest intervention, because if you honestly and seriously work with oral history without this approach that you are advocate of one side, of one story, of one group of victims, then you get into, usually I guess, you should get into delicate and sophisticated vision of the concrete, I don't know, locality or concrete period of time of historical process. It becomes complex, complicated, multi-layered, and so on. So it's not good to sell, not easy to sell maybe, and it's somehow against the trend of contemporary uses and misuses of history or memory. I don't know, in the public sphere, and that's why I am, even though the history of Polish oral history is a kind of success story, if in numbers, in people engaged, in projects, in documentation activities, in academic work, there is something not going. There's coming back to the first argument, first impression. Inspired by your talk, there is something. There is no transmission, or not proper transmission, and it's kind of a pity, and it's question if something can be done with it, or it's despite we have thousands of sources, that we can only opt for a minimal program to to study carefully singular interviews, try to, I don't know, sample them in a clever way and narrate nuanced stories for a couple of colleagues and maybe some newcomers, because it's too, even though it's seemingly so easy and at hand and vernacular and from below and everyday approach and so on. So it seems to be with not big, problem to access this kind of knowledge. Seemingly, it's and it's of course easily used and misused by all sides of memory battles, memory wars, and historiographical quarrels. Still, it somehow, in a way, if you want to treat it seriously, it becomes kind of elitist source, elitist way of studying history. So, in a way, against its manifesto. It's from below. It's so easily accessible for everyone, but somehow it doesn't work like that. So these are my observations, my impressions that I wanted to share with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Piotr, so much for your talk. And we mentioned already a couple of times the exhibition, Our Boys, Nasi Chłopcy. The main curator of this exhibition is sitting just in the very last row. Andrzej, could you wave to us? Yeah, he's waving to us. And his nickname here at the Center for Historical Research is the soul of the Polish nation, because the whole debate he released, or his exhibition ever released, is one of the most important debates in Poland in the recent years. So, Andrzej, thank you so much for your contribution, and if you'd like to engage in conversation with him, Andrzej will be all day with us. Now we are coming to Joanna Wawrzyniak and Krzysztof Florek from the University of Warsaw. And we've known each other with Joanna for a very long time. Joasia is sociologist and historian. She specializes in East Central European memory processes, and her current project or projects include research on memories of socialism, neoliberal transformation, and deindustrialization in Poland, and contributions to collaborative research on cultural heritage and memory processes in Eastern Europe. This is also what Piotr was doing for a certain period of time. So the studies on the transformation in the former Bloch countries. And I'd like to mention only, well, she has published, among others, in Heritage and Society, Memory Studies, in Contemporary European History, in East European Policies and Societies, and Polish Sociological Review. And I'd like to mention only briefly two of her important books. So she coordinated Memory and Change in Europe, Eastern Perspectives, which came out 2016, and she co-authored The Enemy on Display, the Second World War in Eastern European Museums, which appeared 2015, and Joasia is today with her PhD student from Warsaw University, Krzysztof Florek. So the floor is yours.
I think we would need your help with our PowerPoint, please, which we would like to put on. Okay, fantastic. I think I will change the slides myself. Just we'll see if I can do that. Yeah, okay, so that's here probably, right? Yeah. Yeah, but it works. Yeah. I should point at you. Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah, so thank you so much to Eva and to all our hosts for organizing this conference and for having us here. What we are going to do with Krzysztof today is to present really the very beginning of the project. Eva said that it's okay. So we talk about the frame of the project, and that's going to be me, and then Krzysztof will speak about, let's say, a pilot of the initial analysis which we've done. So what is it about? As the title of the conference is Memories and Conflicts, we want to kind of point to the deindustrialization as a realm of contested memories, and especially the industrialization happening in East Central Europe. And in our talk, we'll mainly concentrate on Poland, but we'll also give some comparison with Lithuania. We all know that kinds of like narratives of anger, loss, or injured dignity have been kind of the carriers of conflict, not only in post-socialist countries, but all over the globe. And I'm not going to do a detailed literature review because there is no time for that, but just to point a few recent books which kind of frame some of our analysis or kind of set the field. So Arlie Hochschild, she has recently published the second very important book about that, what has happened in the US, which is called Stolen Pride, and this is how she kind of explained the rise of populism and rise of, let's say, the appeal of Donald Trump and the very peculiar shift that you have, or an interesting development that you have the working class voting for the billionaire. But then there is I would say, like growing scholarship about what has happened in Eastern Europe with the memories of the economic transformation. An absolutely wonderful book, which I would just like to recommend to everyone, is that by our colleague Till Hilmar, Economic Memories After the Fall of the Iron Curtain, where he compares the memories of the health workers and engineers in both Czech Republic and Eastern Germany. With the idea not only to tell how they remember what they went through, but mainly to show or kind of foreground his theory of the economic justice and injustice and the very idea of the deservingness, as he calls that in the book. There is also a fantastic book which is more written from because Till is more a sociologist, and then there is a book In the Storm of Transformation, which was co-authored by Piotr, which puts the stories of two shipyards in Poland and in Croatia in the so-called long, the background of the long transformation starting in the 1970s and kind of ending around the accession to the EU. So that book, as many other developments in current historiography, ends with that focus on only the 1899 and the beginning of the 90s as the moment of the transformation, but tries to put that what has happened in Eastern Europe in much in much longer and at the same time global perspective. And finally, a book which we co-edited recently with Veronika Peche, which is a collection of studies about the remembering the neoliberal turn in several countries of Eastern Europe, where we try to show different layers of those memories, both kind of developing in the realm of official memory, like, I don't know, in Poland, remembering the Balcerowicz plan, right? Both those who remember it positively and negatively, then the cultural memory, but also vernacular memory across several countries. So that's just, just to point you that there is a scholarship now around that, and this is where the project, where our talk today kind of tries to also make an intervention. The project is called Remembering the Industrialization, Moral Emotions in the Memory of Post-Socialist Transformation in Lithuania and Poland. And as I've said, it has just started. It started because of conversation I once had with Jogilę Ulinskaitė from the University of Vilnius. That she has actually a very similar interview collection, which has been done around 10 years ago, and same was my collection, the collection which we've done with Piotr and other scholars. And then we thought that it would be really interesting to do something about those collections together because they were done in a similar industrial milieus. So we wrote the project in the frame, which I can just recommend to everyone, which is called the WEAVE scheme, which is much easier than Horizon, but also gives possibility of getting the funding for international collaborative project if they are bilateral or trilateral. And this is how we managed to get the funding for that. And now we have two research teams, one based at the University of Warsaw, which Krzysztof Florek, which I was very lucky to recruit him, and he has just started writing the PhD within that project. And we also have a postdoctoral fellow with us, Rimante Jaugaite, and then a team of the Vilnius University with Jogilę, Valda, and Oshra. So this is what we intend to do, or what we promise to do. So one is to integrate the theoretical reflection from memory studies, which is my main area of expertise, and the sociology of emotions, which is mainly the Jogile's, this is where she's an expert in, to analyze representation of deindustrialization in post-socialist context. Second, and this is where we kind of really try to focus our research, is to develop the concept of mnemonic emotion narrative, this is how we call it, as a tool, a specific conceptual or methodological tool to trace moral emotions in communicative and cultural memory. And finally, of course, to identify, analyze, but also to compare those moral emotions or mnemonic emotion narratives of the industrial transformation in Poland and Lithuania. This is our data, so we are really lucky to already have the interviews. We don't have to do them. Krzysztof just worked over summer to do the metadata of them to make them comparable across the project. But we also want to study the shift which is happening right now between the communicative memory and the cultural memory. So in the second part of the project, we will concentrate on how the transformation and some aspects of industrial transformation are represented in museums and at heritage sites. And this is where my colleague Rimante is now working on the databases of the museums. We already have them, and this is so interesting because there are such discrepancies between Poland and Lithuania in those respects, and then we'll have specific case studies from both countries. Before we go to a very specific detail fragment of the project, which Krzysztof is going to talk about, two more conceptual remarks. So what are moral emotions? Like, how do we define them? We take the definitions from the sociology of emotions, and just to put it in a nutshell, those are emotions that are linked to social norms and the interest or welfare of society as a whole. So, for instance, when are we angry, right? This is when norms or codes are violated by others, right? Or where do we feel shame or pride, right? So what sociology of emotions teaches us that those are the so-called self-conscious moral emotions arising from self-evaluation or evaluations by others. So what is mnemonic emotion narrative? Because that's the concept Jogilę and I would really like to develop. Now we started with a very simple definition. We might develop that in the project, but in a nutshell, it's a narrative reflecting moral and affective judgments about past events. And again, taking from this sociology of emotions, it indicates the social norms and values evoked in remembering. So what do we want to do in that project beyond the current state of the art? So we are proposing the agonistic approach to memories of the industrialization. We want to map them. We want to name them. And we want to go beyond that research about nostalgia. There is a lot written about nostalgia, whatever, in the region. And it was very important literature, but it's too blurred, too vague, I would say. And especially now, when you see that there are such big differences between that, how people remember the industrialization, and not only having like the positive or the negative narratives of that what has happened, but much more nuanced one. We want to actually map and name those emotions. That's one goal of the project. The other one is to map transformation, as I've already mentioned, how emotions were represented in the communicative memory, in the oral history, or the biography or the interviews which we have access to by those who went through those events and talk about those events, and how they are now represented in cultural institutions. So of course one answer is that they are non-represented, or they are at the moment just representing different emotions. Like the pride of transformation, if you go, I don't know, to European Solidarity Center in Gdańsk, right? It's a very different feeling of pride than the one which someone who had set up his private business might have. And so on. So this is where we want to somehow add to that discourse, and perhaps also try to be a little bit helpful to those curators who are now reworking the exhibitions of the 90s in several museums across Poland and Lithuania, and we know that such projects are underway. And finally, as already mentioned, there is a comparative perspective on industrial milieus in Poland and Lithuania. And now over to Krzysztof.
Thank you. So for the pilot of our project, we have the pilot case of a passenger car factory in Warsaw. It's the so-called FSO factory, and it's on wounded pride of class of professionals and expert on engineers. So to speak briefly about passenger car factory in Warsaw, it has been established post Second World War in 1948. And it has been like formally established in 1950, and up until 1965 it has been mostly designing and producing cars like with cooperation with Soviet Union, but to like really big extent it has been independent. Then post 1965 it has been producing cars and working on the licenses from Italian Fiat company. And then in 1995 it has been privatized by Korean Daewoo, and then after the Daewoo Korean company Daewoo went bankrupt in 2004, it was acquired by Ukrainian company in 2005 by Avtazas. They were producing cars with the cooperation of Chevrolet. But the licenses expired in 2011, and ever since then, the company stopped producing cars. It transformed into, for some period of time, into producing and manufacturing the car parts, or like other, like being like they're cooperating with other factories and industries, but hasn't been manufacturing cars on their own. And so what is mnemonic emotion narrative in interview research? So what we've been looking in interviews is we've been looking for the episodes. So those are the short stories within interviews by which the interviewee expresses the assessment or judgment on past events. So this is what we've been looking in the interviews, yeah, as I've mentioned, it is the wounded pride of professionals. So this is the mnemonic emotion narrative of pride and disappointment. So yeah, we go from the perspective of collective pride of engineers and professionals, And during the socialist period, it was like the pride of being a driving force of Polish car industry. Obviously, in the industry, the car industry is like something like we can say the pinnacle of the industry in general. So the car industry being really important, like in general for the socialist industry, being really complex. So like this was something to be really proud of, to be part of the factory and being the pinnacle of the structure, being a driving force of the factory as engineers and as the professionals, the people who made it work and who designed the cars on their own. So this is as well the pride of knowledge and ingenuity during the socialist period. Well, obviously, like with the constraints. At the one hand, it was like, as I've mentioned, like up until 1965 was a lot of independence because the car were designed on their own. But on the other hand, obviously limited technology, limited resources, and yeah. So then we have ambivalence of privatization because at one hand it comes with technological leap, technological advancements, bringing the technology and big development of the cars. But on the other hand, it comes with the loss of agency, loss of independence. So the company is acquired by the Korean concern, by the Korean company. So obviously, like with the privatization, the changes in structure, there is the loss of agency and like loss of independence and loss of like designing freedom. So we have this disappointment with lack of agency and as well inability to keep the factory alive. Because as I've mentioned, the Korean company, the Evo, it went bankrupt in 2004. So there is the notion of disappointment and feeling that like we gave the factory away and we like weren't able to get the situation like in our hands to maybe change something. And keep the factory alive. So we have like this, like the pride is then reimagined because like we have there's still this feeling of a disappointment, but on the other hand, there is this still collective pride of the class of engineers, of their skills, like as a source of dignity in changing environment. So yeah, like speaking about like this, like looking for these stories in the narratives, the excerpts for the narratives, those episodes. So yeah, we have, for example, like the excerpt from the interview when like this is already like the pride of the work, of the independent work of the design, and especially comparing to the Western solutions, to the solutions of other European car manufacturers that like at some point we weren't like the Western cars weren't superiors to ours, and this was like a really big pride, especially like for those engineers that like because it was like already it was still independent. It wasn't on the license of like any other Western country. It wasn't yet the license of Italian Fiat. It was like wholly independent. So there was a lot of pride in like designing it, manufacturing it, and like comparing it to other Western car manufacturers. And so, as I've mentioned, like with the privatization by the Koreans, it comes the ambivalent feelings because, like in the narratives of the interviewees, we can see that like most of them, and like especially those who are in the class of the professionals with higher education, engineers, they really admired the Korean company, like the Western technology. They've seen it with the MEAE. Yeah, like we can see, as I highlighted, their whole attitude towards the design, towards the new technologies, towards the knowledge. Like you could see it with admire, with glory and splendor. And they admit that they knew how to manage, especially when it comes to managing like the whole production, managing and changing with the knowledge of production. But at the same time, we have the loss of the agency and the control. So we have one interviewee here who had this like the feeling that he's being pushed into the subordinate role, that like obviously he still like is able to work a lot, who is like he's happy to be working on new innovative technologies, and like he can see that in general there is a lot of improvements, but at the same time he sees that there is like there is no anymore like this freedom of making decisions, especially on the higher level. And like this is the place where we see the tension that in the structure, that like he didn't keep calm and like be like in this subordinate role. Like we can see like this yearn for recognition and for respect. Yeah, and there comes as well like the disappointment. This is like still in the same narrative that because the workers, the people in there were like pushed more into the subordinate role, and because obviously like the factory was mainly in hands of the Koreans, so there is the feeling of disappointment that at some period, at some moment, there were like still opportunities to keep the factory alive, keep the factory afloat. But yeah, there is the feeling of disappointment that yeah, we weren't able to take enough into our hands the control of the company, that it was simply given away. And then we have like this disappointment and like the mix of negative emotions that the interviewee coming past by the factory just make him sad to drive past it, because he just see that there was a lot of potential, especially in terms of like not only the advancement that we made in the 90s and 2000s, but the loss of potential in terms of the experts, the engineers, that they had a lot of potential to like still keep going and like to still produce the cars. And so from this feeling of disappointment and the pride of like the being part of the factory, being the part of those people who work there, we have the reimagining the pride. So from the pride of just working there, for being able to work on the solutions, from being proud of the work that they've been able to do, the cars that they were able to produce, we have this like shift in the pride that they are like mostly proud of like their own class of those engineers, that after the company finally closed and collapsed post 2011, that wherever those engineers and that class of people, wherever they went, that they were able to find a job easily, and they were like really respected. And we can see that this is even in comparing to the sort of Western culture and Western countries, because we have interviewees saying that wherever they went to Germany, to England, they were able to be just as good as the German or English engineers. And similarly, with speaking about working with Koreans, because there is like this feeling that obviously they came with a lot of advancements, technology, so it was really good. But at the same time that yeah, we can see that there is the admission that they were better at the time when they came, but after the engineers they learned technology, they were like they were just as good as the Korean engineers, Korean workers, or even in some cases that they were better than them. So we can see that there is this comparison with the Western people coming from Western countries with Western technology. Yeah, yeah. So to conclude, we have this like pride of being a driving force of Polish car industry. So it's like relating to social norms and values, just like being a part of like national economic progress and industrial achievement as a source of collective prestige, and pride of knowledge and ingenuity during socialist period. So it is again innovation, technical skill, and resourcefulness under unfavorable conditions and with limited possibilities in socialist economy. And then we have the disappointment with lack of agency and inability to keep the factory alive. So yeah, especially with this understanding that the value, that the resources, technology, and potential of the staff, specifically the class of engineers and and the professionals, that it has been wasted and that they hadn't had opportunity to take the matters into their own hands and maybe steer the company in the different direction. So the pride is then reimagined, and it's like as a reimagined into the skills of Polish professionals, and like even especially comparing to, are they Koreans or other Western countries like Germany or England, being just as good as anyone, and like being on the level of the Western European countries or like Koreans. So yes, with Wounded Pride, the directions that we want to go further with. So the interviews that we've been analyzing for this pilot were conducted with men. So there is like obviously gender differences that like we need to dive into and analyze those interviews as well. And pride and disappointment in class perspective, because this is the wounded pride of class of professionals who were less affected by the transformation in terms of like economy, in terms of job perspective. So it was like mainly disappointment with the factory being closed, not being able to take matters into their own hand, the lack of agency. But comparing, for example, to the emotions of working class and the class of professionals, the obviously pride, the wounded pride of working class and their disappointment and their negative emotions, they differ from the class of professionals. And maybe I will give Joanna to...
Yeah, just to a couple of final points, but just to add to what Krzysztof was saying first, I thought that it's really kind of instructive to focus on professionals and engineers because they were not victims of transformation in the economic sense, right? And when you look in the biographies, not into the narratives, but like in the actual biographies, they actually were quite well off, like either those who stayed in the WU or they just made their careers somewhere else. So that's part of the narratives which says that, well, we were successful somewhere else. It's not only the figure of discourse, but it was kind of the social fact. But on the other hand, they really kind of cherish and develop that narrative of the wounded professional pride. We might still think if the term wounded is a good one, we're thinking of the injured professional pride, but there is something which was really there was a turn like in how the transformation went on. But then there's of course the question of the further direction of research, and something which is like super interesting in the Polish-Lithuanian comparison is the question whether this kind of the national pride, which was expressed by those engineers and professionals, we had our Polish factories, like even though the factory FSO, it was all on Italian licenses later on, and before that were the Russians who actually helped to construct the factory. The idea was, as a figure of speech, that was the Polish, that was the Polish industry. Yeah, two more minutes, and yeah. So and then when you go to Lithuania, there is such a strong feeling that the entire industry was the Soviet colonial project, right? So it's much more difficult on the grassroots level to express that feeling of pride, referring to the national values, right? And this is when I really do not like this. Poles always saying that Poland is specific because of solidarity. But in the industrial sector, it really makes sense. This is also where we come to how the industry now, it's not only, the industrialization transformation is represented not only in the interview level, but also in the cultural heritage side. There are many more industrial sites which are representing the socialist period in Poland than in any other countries, drawing on the opposition to the system, but on the other hand, that opposition was based in the industry. So yeah, one of our research questions is: was the national pride, like industrial pride, possible in Lithuania? And this is where we are going to compare the similar narratives of the professionals in the Lithuanian set of narratives. But also, of course, there is entire research about pride in comparative perspective. So one of our Lithuanian colleagues now is preparing a presentation about actually those who are really feel successful, right? With the, or at least express the narratives of success in Lithuania. And then she asked a question which I think is legitimate, comparing that with the early Hochschild, account of that, what has happened in the US, saying, was the change of the system, like from to democracy, all the hopes and promises of the transformation, was it something which added, at let's say positive side? Of course, it also suppressed the stories of the industrialization, but also managed, let's say, to create a space where people could place a more positive emotion at the time of the industrial decline, right? Differently. It was in Eastern Europe than it was in, let's say, in US and other countries like with very much neoliberal, fast industrial decline. And finally, the other concept or the moral emotions or the mnemonic emotional narrative we want to work with is the provincial shame. And this is why this is where some of those narratives, they really kind of resonate with, because it's, Koreans, like, some of them are really racist, the interviews, these Koreans who teach us how to do things, right? And they don't know that we know it better. But it's very much similar to those with the encounters of Austrian firms or many others, when they say, those Westerners, they treat us as inferior, as someone who is inferior, who doesn't have the skills and the knowledge, and we do, right? This is what, so this kind of, that's the let's say, interrelated mnemonic emotional narrative, which we want to go deeper into later on. Thank you so much.
So before I start my presentation, yeah, I was too quick. Nevertheless.
Ceremonial thing, which is always an element of all the conferences. Thank you. It was just great. It's great having, three of you here, since Piotr was working on a similar, very comparatistic project on the shipyards in Poland and in Croatia, and I'm pretty sure that he's going to engage in the discussion afterwards. But now we are going back to World War II and to Joanna Urbanek's project. And, what connects me and Joanna is a very important Polish historian who died 4 years or 3 years ago, Professor Włodzimierz Borodziej, one of the best experts in the history of the Polish-German relations. And Joanna and Zofia Wójcicka were the students of Włodzimierz Borodziej. Joanna is a historian, but also a psychologist. She was studying at Warsaw University, among others at the Institute of History at Warsaw University. Now she works at the House of European History in Brussels, and she's in charge of the exhibition projects there. She recently curated a new temporary exhibition, and I'd like to recommend to you this exhibition called Fake or Real, a history of forgery and falsification. This is about fake news going back to the history of ancient Greece until today. The exhibition is presented at the House of European History in Brussels, but also the Polish version of the exhibition has been opened recently in Gdańsk at Museum of World War II. So for those of you who are interested in, we recommend going to two places, Brussels or Gdańsk. though there's also an exhibition catalog edited by Joanna in English and French, I guess, isn't it? But today, Joanna is going to talk on her project, which is called KZ syndrome, experience of Auschwitz and its meaning for the survivors in medical records. Joanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And indeed, if you go to see Nasi chłopcy, our boys, then like as an appendix, you can see also Fake for Real. I will be very happy, and I hope you like it. But here I'm coming very humbled with my project, which I am conducting at the University of Luxembourg, and which is on different topic. I'm humbled because I am in the presence of people who wrote fundamental books which are around this topic, so about the personal experience of concentration camp in oral history, about political aspects of the memory, this creation of this memory, like people who were very important mnemonic actors in creating how we remember concentration camps today, and I would like to look into their personal experience that has been reflected by medical records. And I am also, and mainly I will talk about this today, about those medical records and about the research conducted in Poland or in Polish territory immediately after the war until 1991. It is it has been many books published on this topic that reflect on French, American, German, Dutch, Danish research on the experience of being a prisoner and survivor of the concentration camp, and in Poland. This history is to the extent known, but there are, to a certain extent, no synergies in those projects. So the whole concept of KZ syndrome is actually, direct us towards different studies, which were mainly conducted in Denmark, in the Netherlands, and in Poland. And there is kind of no, like, one comprehensive study, which I'm also not planning because I will concentrate on Poland, which would actually show those links and networks between those groups, how they were drawing from each other and how experiences of Polish survivors were similar or different and how they were written about in different countries. And also, this is an element, an aspect that caused a lot of frustration in Poland. Still, like this maybe complex syndrome is visible in the Polish medical circles, who never managed to kind of implant their huge comprehensive study on the survivors in the general knowledge. It has been barely mentioned in the books, fundamental books published on the topic. It has been like really not talked about a lot, although there were like a lot of efforts to try to promote it. I will start from the very beginning. I will start with liberation of Auschwitz. Here you can see a footage, a standstill from the propaganda film documentary created by the Soviets after liberation of Auschwitz, a few days after the liberation. So this scene is staged, And you can see men and women waving towards the soldiers of the Ukrainian front, apparently very happy about being liberated. However, there is a certain contrast within how actually people who were just liberated felt. Sorry, this is the only quote that I don't have translated. I will explain what I mean by that, what Primo Levi means by that, who was among those who, as we know, stayed in Auschwitz until the end. So Primo Levi says that this information, this news, didn't provoke any direct emotion. Because of, and after so many months, which were filled with different emotions, which he explained, my sensitivity, like it was kind of frozen. He was not able to come up with any emotion of being happy, being hopeful. For others, it's this emotion that's from the report I will be talking about. That what is overwhelming is confusion, uncertainty, and anxiety. They didn't believe that their nightmare is over. What is the report I am quoting here? It's a report that it has been discussed in the general history of liberation of Auschwitz by Lachendro, among others. It's a final report of a special Soviet commission that was investigating the place that they found after liberation. And what is very interesting for my project is the work of Forsenic Medical Commission that studied the psychological state of the liberated inmates. Actually, I don't know any study that would go very much into the works and the conclusions of that commission. I tried to kind of understand who was the author, how did it come about, and among the doctors that took part in this work was certain Nikolai Vannovsky. And I find that what they actually published in this report, it's pretty. It's a very empathetic view on the survivors. It hints at theories and a certain approach towards psychiatry that was present up to a point in Russia, but was abandoned during the hardcore Stalinist times. And Vannovsky was a man of a great career. Actually, he made his career as psychiatrist by basically sending wounded and people who underwent, mostly wounded, maybe also mentally wounded people back to front during the Great Patriotic War. So he was a man of career. He was not a kind of a person who would bring an empathetic view on the people found in Auschwitz. Yet the commission says that they managed to interview 3,000 people, 3,000 survivors. Just immediately during the work, during the weeks and months, 3 months of work in the field, so to say. Here we can see from the report a photo how this commission worked. So the survivors, still, of course, in the newly found clothes that were just on spot, were brought or for those who could walk, they walked to the commission and they were interviewed. Some of them, of course, couldn't speak. Babies couldn't speak, but they were examined. Of course, not only the psychological state was taken into account, but all the medical elements. What is also clear in the works of the commission is the presence of the medical doctors who were former inmates. And here I found about this man, Bruno Fischer, who was a Czech Jew, and what I found, thanks to the research on the Czech website. He worked at the University of Prague. He was a psychiatrist who was actually interested in psychological trauma, and in the 20s, around 26, 28, he even published an article which was dealing with the topic. So I suspect, this is my thesis, that he was the one who actually helped Vanowski in interpreting the material that was gathered. So now what was observed? What was observed on the spot was that the survivors, they manifested basically two types of behavior that they will kind of keep, or maybe not the same people will develop the same way of reacting, but they were displaying two types of behavior. One was what I showed in the quotes from Primo Levi, the sense of apathy, the sense of lethargic mood, in which they were not managed to kind of process the moment of being liberated, mostly due to also hunger. But this is not only that, because the state of apathy will stay and later will be very much studied by the French psychiatrists, who will soon coin this phrase, asthenia progressiva gravis. And the other group were people who were displaying this like overly active behavior. And they were trying really to interact with the Soviet Commission. As it was explained, they were displaying submissive behaviors or attempts to guess the mood and wishes of the new lords, new masters, to avoid punishment and possibly gain favors to survive. So, like two ways of basically reacting to the liberation, and yeah. So in the report, striking, not striking, like we have the sincere feeling of being overwhelmed, that the cruelty of the something unimaginable, even for the Soviets who entered the camp, the same Soviets who went through the Great Purge and experienced a lot during the war. That was something incomprehensible to them yet. So what is the role of the Polish doctors who come on site? There was a Polish commission that was investigating the crimes, which was allowed into the camp after the Soviet commission, and there we don't see the same interest in the psychiatric state of the survivors. There are certain like expressions about their behavior, that they are stealing bread or putting it under the pillow. Yes, but it is not so advanced, and there is no psychiatrist in the place. Yet, one of the first transport that takes the survivors into Krakow is the transport to the hospitals, is the transport which will go to psychiatric hospital, and there those who were declared sick were taken care of. So it's the time when there is no proper medical care as we understand today. Medications that were really altering the mood of the people in grave state, like antipsychotic medication and so on, they came into use in the 1950s only. So it was mainly a way to give calm and give time to those who were displaying or very agitated or very kind of silenced and very detached behavior. Yet the psychiatric clinic in Krakow and what would be translated to psychiatric clinic of the Jagiellonian University in Krakow becomes the most important place in Poland to later deal with the former prisoners, survivors. And this happens in 1958, so very early, but with a few years of delay. Why it is so? Because during the Stalinist times, as I already mentioned about the Soviet Union, psychiatry goes through the period of hardcore Pavlovism, which is only concentrated on the research of instincts, reactions, and so on. You know the Pavlov's dog experiment. So it goes in totally different directions. It is not something without a value, but it doesn't give the kind of framework to deal with the psychological trauma. In the 58, however, there is an initiative that gets support from the highest echelons of the communist regime, thanks to the prominent former inmates of Auschwitz. Let's just mention Józef Cyrankiewicz. There are ideas to, first of all, create Auschwitz clubs, so gatherings and circles of the people who were former inmates. And second, that those groups which meet, which discuss, would keep very close ties. That is very important for this group, that actually they relate mainly among themselves. That it's possible and it's important to conduct a research on the psychiatric state. Some of them are still patients of the psychiatric clinic of the Jagiellonian University in Krakow. Some come back, so they are not hospitalized steadily, but they come back. And why they have distrust? Why they go there and not to another clinic, another center? This is due to two men, Stanisław Kłodziński and Antoni Kępiński. Stanisław Kłodziński is not a psychiatrist, but he is a former prisoner of Auschwitz and a friend of Antoni Kępiński, who is at the Department of Adult Psychiatry at the Medical Academy in Krakow. Kępiński is a former prisoner of Miranda de Ebro, so he was a prisoner of a concentration camp in Spain during the war. So he has some sort of experience, and most of all, he is a very charismatic person in contact with the patients. He manages not only to convince them to speak up, but manages to bring a group of several dozens of psychiatrists and very, very interesting people, which also explain why this group was so successful under the communist regime. So we have people who have links with the communist authorities, and we have Shoah survivors, which are not yet taken into account as a separate group in Poland at all, but who have this perspective and later will be able to conduct first research solely on Shoah survivors. And we have people who are very close to the, extremely close to the Catholic Church. Wanda Półtawska, who is a best female friend of the future Pope John Paul II, which actually plays the role also in getting recognition and being protected. So this very heterogeneous group around Kępiński starts to conduct the research which results in the hundreds of articles that were published in the appendix to the major medical journal in Poland, medical journal, and then Auschwitz, Oświęcim is the addition, published yearly. This appendix to the journal over the course of 30 years published 1,000 articles by 477 authors. I didn't calculate it yet how much it was devoted to psychiatry, but it's an immense work. Kępiński, together with the other researchers who study along, usually with the lesser number of interviewees, patients, because through the hands of the and through the ears of this group, more than like around 1,000 of people give their testimonies. So every year there is a research starting from the very first questionnaires and interviews with the first 70 survivors that decided to speak up. That is published in 1960 until studies on the second generational trauma and Shoah survivors as such in the 90s. So it goes through all those phases that we see in the international research on trauma. And what is mainly the most important and most well-known finding is the very comprehensive definition of KZ syndrome, which is, as it was understood by then, emotional liability with rapid mood swings, difficulty in concentrating and work and everyday-like activities, ruminations about traumatic events, social withdrawals, feelings of insufficiency, nervousness, fatigue, and what was then understood as premature aging. So probably a bit mixing depression and physical kind of way it demonstrated itself. So this group becomes problematic, mainly for themselves. I will quickly jump to the conclusion. I will still study their self-descriptions, which I acquired, but how they come to the free world, how they describe themselves. So one of the interviewees says, when I left the camp, I thought that the streets of the cities will be empty because there are so many millions murdered. I was surprised by the streets full of people. So the feeling of not being actually able to adapt to the new world is consistent. It doesn't change. Actually, those dozens of years, three decades of studies shows that although the situation of the survivors seems to be kind of stable in the first 10, 15 years, with aging it becomes worse. That is one of the very interesting findings. that here I quote Maria Orwitz, so Shoah survivor with the, but not concentration camp survival from the team, that this group are the people who feel good actually only within their own group. They feel that the society cannot understand their experience, that their experience it's not translatable, that they cannot contribute to the society because of being extremely nervous, because of not understanding other people's problems, not being able to react in a socially acceptable way in the social situations, like, for example, funerals. Many were saying that they were not able to feel any pain because of the loss. And other reactions. So the experience of Auschwitz becomes a reference point to every aspect of their life and affects reactions and also relations with others. Feelings of insufficiency, this I mentioned, and kind of not being able to relate to the world. So within this group, how they write about themselves, it's kind of the same feeling. So although like many publications, even in the journal that I mentioned, show a positive kind of like a hopeful conclusions of what we now call post-traumatic growth. This is not what the prisoners themselves, the survivors, what they explain themselves and how they see their life. For most of them, it's a feeling of absolute failure and not being able to continue being dead inside, and only actually feeling well in the circle of the former prisoners. I think I will end here. A very, very moving quote by Antoni Kępiński, so the main hero of this paper. What he says, it's so paradoxical, because he basically explained how the former prisoners, how the survivors go back to life only when they talk about their experience of Auschwitz, that it becomes a leitmotif, a turning point, a point of reference to their entire life. I would like to, in my research, kind of show those two aspects, so this personal experience and what actually was done about those raw accounts by this team of researchers. Also, I would like to put it against the other projects in Europe and the United States that were dealing with the same topic. Yeah, a big question mark why they were not able to actually promote their ideas so much. From the study of the journal, I see that they were extremely active internationally, that they were going to the conference. This is a sort of a myth, and what I understood from the history of the Iron Curtain, that it was not so easy to actually go to the international conference. They were doing it, and it seems that they spoke foreign languages enough in order to channel their thoughts. Why? Maybe this years of kind of inactivity of the Polish psychiatry until 1958 didn't allow them to create really close ties with the other researchers in order to be kind of respected in the network enough that their results stuck. Or maybe indeed they were not so good communicators. Maybe the fact that after 1968, in the 70s, until 1980, when PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, was finally defined and put as a mental condition that was codified. Maybe their a bit too narrow approach, which was always concentrating on the concentration camp inmates, became obsolete. Maybe it's because they continued to concentrate rather on concentration camp survivors as such and not Shoah survivors, which was more popular in the United States, in Europe, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. These are questions. I will try to get closer to conclusions. Yes, and thank you for all possible comments and reflections and remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanna. Usually a chair says very interesting and so on, but this is so superficial when we are exposed to such topics as Joanna presented us. Piotr, to be quite honest, I think that you are a better person to chair this panel, since it covers two fields of your experience, and I noticed you have made a lot of notes. But first of all, I'd like to give a chance to you to talk, to ask questions, to express your comments. So, who'd like to ask first question or just to express first comment? Eva. I'll be doing it. I love being mobile.
Thank you very much for these presentations. Sorry, Piotr, I had to go out, so I have no questions for you, but I have some questions, very general, for 2-second papers. So, concerning Joanna and Krzysztof, I have a question about I mean, maybe some methodological question. I heard that there is another project ongoing at this moment on the German-Polish comparative perspective in the mining industry, and the transformation that was already done and has to be done in order to the climate change issues. And as far as I understood, they are also questioning, interviewing families in order to see how this mining pride of this full families which were engaged in this industry deal with memories and so on. So this is a question about the families, maybe? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's relevant, but it's just a, yeah. And another question is also about in terms of methodology, do you take into account also objects, like objects, physical objects, like some kind of vehicle, or maybe some kind of, how to say, condensed memory objects, maybe in interviews or catalyzers of something? And also more general question about this national pride, because I found it very interesting also for my topic. Is it maybe connected also, because you mentioned this Polish exception, is it also maybe connected to this more broader nation building in Poland, which also includes history teaching, but also this banal nationalism, to quote Billing, all this flow of nation pride elements? So these are questions for both of you. And for Joanna, I found this very amazing that as in the exhibitions, like in Majdanek, in Auschwitz, first exhibition were made also by former prisoners. So here again, they are involved in this process of healing, and it's very interesting, I think. here again, the question, is it because the psychiatry field was more developed in the USSR? I think maybe it was. I heard a little bit about the recent research of Justina Smalkite, who works in Lithuanian case, not about the prisoners of camps, but in psychiatric field. So is it related of the stage of the field? And yes, also about your method. I understood that you work on these articles in this journal, and you also mentioned the literature. How do you deal with the question, which kind of literature it is? Is it testimonial literature or, I don't know, fiction literature? And how you deal about this question of methodology? Thank you.
Okay, so Joanna, both Joanna and Krzysztof, how would you react to the question asked by Eva?
Shall we answer now or shall we collect?
Okay, so up to us. Yeah, Zosia is raising her hand.
It was all very, very interesting to hear again about all your projects. Not again, but I didn't hear about some of that. But, and I have just a few maybe questions, reflections. One to Piotr. I was just wondering, because you seemed sort of disappointed that this big work of Polish oral historians didn't translate it to sort of public awareness of certain issues. And I was just wondering if this is specific for oral history, or if this is a general issue, and in fact not only Polish, that scientific findings in the field of humanities translate only very little, or at least with a big delay, into public awareness. And if it's like, if you ask why, if it's sort of specific for oral history, or if the Polish oral historians make any bigger mistakes not bringing it to the people, or if it's just this sort of general phenomenon or rule or whatever. And to Jasia and Krzysztof, I have just question, reflection. I was wondering, because I understand one of the issues that is behind this whole research on transformation is also to ask what is the connection between the experience of transformation and what is happening now and the rise of populism and so on, and if there is a connection between this. And I was wondering in how far, like in Poland at least, those people who vote mostly for populist parties, the right-wing populists, I guess there is a sort of generational shift. So among those people who are now aged, like in our age or even bigger, there is less people who vote actually for those populist parties than among younger people. So if you search for a connection, is it a sort of transition of this experience to the next generation? And did you sort of made any research on this, or how would you explain? This is one question. And the other question, how does it connect to experience of communism, work during communism? Because when you talk, of course, those are engineers and so on, you just talked about, it seems like the hardest time was transformation. There they didn't have the influence, they lost their pride, as if before everything was like, okay. So I was wondering, I mean, what do they say? For example, I remember, I don't know, my mother telling when she visited people in Łódź, those were not engineers, but workers, women workers in the 70s, and they were sort of deprived of every pride. And this was a major issue, why they started to strike. So how does it connect to the memories of communism? And the last question to Joanna is actually connected to what Eva asked. So I'm just very curious about your further work. And the two questions, could you tell more about the archive of Kępiński? Like, what do you find there? And the other thing is, what is specifically because you mentioned, which astonished me a bit, because I didn't notice it so much, that they really had this group of Holocaust survivors among both the researchers and the people they talked to. But they somehow in their articles kind of tried to define the specific experience of whatever they called it at that time. Or because I didn't notice that, but I read it only very superficially in a way.
Okay, allen guten Dingen sind drei.
Okay. I've sort of a general question, reflection for all four of you. What links all the project is this idea that you're working on individual narratives, whether it be biographies or medical archives, and the question is, how do you go from, and I think this maybe addresses the frustration, you collect 6,000 oral history, and how do you communicate that? Similar question, like how do you go from the individual interviews with professionals, of course you have hypotheses behind, and make sort of a collective story that goes beyond the actual individuality of the what's called. What I'm getting at is how do you go from the individual to sort of collective categories? Do you look for, when you're looking either at the oral history or at the interviews, are you looking at when they say I? Is it like a socially situated I as a professional, I as, or the types of we? And similar question I had to the group of Holocaust survivors when they, how do they appear in medical archives? Because psychiatry has a tendency of saying, okay, each person is an individual case, but at the same time, they work their way from the individual case to some kind of a collective syndrome. So the question is, how do you go from the individual to the collective, the survivors sort of as an established category, and what other perhaps types of competing identities were there? Was there like a specific Jewish identity? Was there a specific identity as somebody that was sent to Auschwitz as a communist? Are there perhaps other types of identities that are at work? And, I mean, I think that's implicit in your, or explicit actually, when you talk about comparing Lithuanians with provincial, with engineers with working class. Yeah, and so the question is, how do you produce sort of collective, or kind of a collective storytelling to transform the 6,000 cases into something that's communicable as sort of, how can we explain, different forms of appeal of populism or not, or transition? So kind of a general question of mythology.
Okay, so how would you react to these questions asked by our participants? Piotr, perhaps.
My questions to me were shorter, so maybe I should be the last, but okay, we can follow the line. So the yes and no. Of course, it's a regular like frustration of the humanities, let's say, but pathetically. But it's here somehow promises were maybe bigger or stronger, because it seemingly was like very close to public memory, or to something which is easily transferable, and there is a kind of, let's say, also kind of frustration or maybe disappointment with the theoretical weakness, and this also to myself that maybe if there was more like more theoretical sophistication around oral history that we produced, it's still to be done, of course. Even then, maybe there could be a more visible difference between academic. I mean, I'm not also elitistic academic. I don't have this approach, but still, there could be more difference between like using interviews exemplary for every story you narrate in the public as historian or whoever in the museum, with some more careful. And I think we have not done that. There is a house of theoretical inspiration, and that's basically it. And then when you start your work, it's like you kind of you have to develop your own approach somehow. So maybe this for a moment, and continuing with this big number. Again, this is because of lack of this methodology. We have a lot of methodological texts and thoughts about how to do interviews, how to maybe sample them into the story about a concrete topic, but we have no idea how to tell about big collections, and then they become a kind of placative examples of some politics of memory, in fact, or something like that, which is false, which is just they are used by the institutions to legitimate their work for good and bad, but we have no idea about the content, which is not graspable that easily and cannot be. So we have not really good way to go beyond these numbers. That's why we all the time quote these numbers: 50,000 in the Spielberg archive, I don't know, 6,000 in the Carta archive, and so on and so on. But it doesn't say much. Okay. I have also a question to Joanna, but maybe later or in the break.
Thank you so much also to Piotr and Joanna for absolutely fascinating talks, and I also have questions to you which I will postpone to lunch. But now thanks a lot to Eva, Zofia and Jay, and what I would, starting with methodology, we try to make it simple, Eva, because already the project is complex. So we have interviews and heritage sites, and we have like different kinds of representation we are working with, right? So for that, we are not interviewing the second generation, we are not doing objects. Well, the interviews as they were collected, at least in Poland, they also have, but some of them in Lithuania too, they have accompanying photography collections and so on, but I do not think that they will be super important for us for the analysis itself. But the way they speak about their families, which they often do, because these were, these narrative interviews when the people tell their entire life story. It's of course important from the perspective of emotions when they, because some of them locate that. So some of them locate their pride, if you will, in their children, right? Well, I just remember one quote from one interview from Radom, and it was a former party member, by the way, and he said, I was so disappointed because I studied history, then I was this party member and so on, and I was so disappointed with my education. So I taught my children, do mathematics. That doesn't change, right? and he's like very happy about this fact that they really like succeeded professionally. Like so those stories, yes, those are important, but not the intergenerational story that would be too complex for that particular project, although it's of course an interesting question for future. And Krzysztof is going to talk in a moment just a little bit how we code interviews, because I think that's one of the methodology questions which answer some of Jay's concerns. Zosia, I think I wasn't clear. We are not connecting that to populism, but the research on populism is a context of, let's say, the background in literature we have right now, because there's so much research on emotions, like emotions in politics and so on, has been done because of the populist context. But I do find a lot of that like sweeping generalization, right? What the people say about of course there is mobilization of frustration and anger, but you can mobilize and frustration of workers and young people and whoever you want if you are a skillful politician. So I wouldn't, as far as I know, those interviews, because I've already worked them in different contexts, I don't see a direct connection. In some of the life stories, yes, because they voted for Law and Justice, they become the members of that, but there is no direct relation. And actually, I hope it's going to be also one of the one of the results of the project, that we are able to show a more complex map of emotions. And that was just one narrative, like one narrative trend which we have found there. Yes, and as to Piotr knows those interviews. Of course, Krzysztof knows them well. So they were life stories. So they tell the story of their life and socialism. Coming to your previous question, And it's interesting because they're very ambiguous about that. So some of them are super nostalgic, but some of them, you know, are very conscious about their own nostalgia. You know, maybe I'm telling you those stories that it was so nice because I was young at the time. You know, so they are quiet, and then yes. So there is a lot of ambiguity, and this is again that ambiguity which we are mapping in that project, right? Yeah, so and within the same, let's say, life story narratives, you can have a few, like mnemonic emotional narratives, right? So it's not only one. Yeah, and the question like why to believe us, right? Or how do we generalize, right? From this. So of course there is a huge discussion in the qualitative sociology, oral history, and so on. But what I believe we do, we look for trends, right? So it's not representative in the sociological quantitative terms, but we are finding trends, and it's so interesting for us that we are able to find the same trends in, let's say, Poland, in Lithuania, right? With coders, and that's Krzysztof is going though. And if they are similar, like in across, let's say, several factories in Poland and then across several factories in Lithuania, then I think some of the results can be generalized, like, so we can say that they are more general and more valid, and then we of course contextualize that in other research and so on. That's the way we can go. But Krzysztof, would you like to add a few words how you actually code the interviews and so on?
Yeah, so as we've highlighted, those like my part of the presentation is still the pilot. So like we are just the beginning, and like with the coding of the interviews, it was like as well pilot. But the way we proceed from the like, technical point of view is like we in some pilots we like agree like especially on emotions. So we agree on the like certain emotions, their like descriptions, what are those emotions, and we then just try to like code sometimes, because obviously it is difficult in some excerpts, episodes, it's like difficult to differ whether it is like the certain emotion, because then it can be anger, resentment, disappointment. So we at the beginning we try to like keep it simple, I would say. So we just, for example, code it as a group of negative emotions, and then we agree whether like we focus on like one emotion, for example, pride or disappointment or resentment, or we agree on like certain topic. So, for example, we have here right now a class of professionals, engineers, experts. And then yeah, we just like go through the excerpts, those episodes that we've coded, and yeah, look for the trends, as Joanna said, because yeah, even in the pilot that we've done for the FSO factory, like for example, that we have like 2 interviews with engineers, and then we can see that they have like the similar sort of pride, that they like speak about similar things. But for example, like their disappointment can be a little bit different, and then like it differs because they obviously have like different background. For example, in that case, it might have been like the amount of the time that they've been working here, because like one engineer, he worked there for like 40 years and the other worked for 10 years. So obviously his like pride and this disappointment with the collapse of the factory will be different than the one to the guy who worked there for 40 years. But their pride from being, for example, the class of the engineers, and their emotion narrative of pride of like this, their ingenuity, and like comparing themselves to the Western engineers, to the Western knowledge, to the Koreans is pretty much the same. So yeah, just focusing on the trends.
Yeah, just one more thing to add. The interesting part of that is that the interviews are, now we agreed, because we work with the translation in English at the beginning to see if let's say the Lithuanian coders and the Polish coders will map the same emotions and kind of to have the same, let's say, methodological tools, but they are more complex and nuanced, in the original language, even though the automated translation are better and better. So yeah, so they are coded in the original language, but then the episodes, the mnemonic emotional narratives are then translated into English to get everyone. And that's really
exactly, because then we can just look at the episodes that we've coded and be able to just like correct them and then get nuanced.
Before we go to Joanna, I'd like to ask a quick question to Piotr only, related to your project on the shipyards in Croatia and on the Polish Baltic coast. So what Joanna and Krzysztof were talking about, coming to the conclusions, going from the individual experiences and trying to conceptualize them in the form of a trend. This was exactly the same methodology you were trying to apply in your project, or there were some differences?
Yeah, we were not that sophisticated in terms of interpreting interviews. We didn't have this category that you coined, which is very nice. I fully take it, buy it, but the book is already published, so I will not use it. But yes, it was the same. But with some, I would add specificity of concrete life work worlds, depending on the branch of industry, more men or more women in factory and. So of course, the shipyard is a very specific product because it's on one hand a kind of factory Fordism-like production. On the other, there's still a lot of craft, manual work. So a lot of emotions circulate around this craftsmanship of shipbuilding because it's. But one idea I had when listening to you is with these Korean guys, and you said something about racists against them, or something like that emotion. It can have this rejection of a foreigner who tells us what to do, but there is beneath that there might be a kind of real feeling. All feelings are real, but a real judgment, kind of realistic, that they were suddenly pushed down in the production chain, which was the case with shipyard and with many other industries. That it's a question of power. That managers come from abroad in a simple way. That someone from a foreigner tells me what to do. But there is something more, and it's connected with this national emotion in industry that back then they had an image of a kind of coherent production chain from the very beginning. Let's say Polish engineers designing Polish ships in Gdańsk, and then they were built either in Gdynia or Gdańsk or Szczecin. Even though they used the old German infrastructure and that was, let's say, Stalinist decision to put shipyard industry in Poland, still this was a kind of Polish product from the very beginning to the very end, and that finished. And even though today Polish shipyard industry is flourishing, they feel this kind of loss, that they are in the production chair somewhere down there. That they don't design big ships anymore, that they do some sub-products, byproducts, or small things. And with this national moment, I thought about, I don't know if it's just a hypothesis, that I think you can look deeper into the education of engineers, of let's say, technical intelligentsia, how this was done in communist socialist Poland. As from my experience from this project, this was very much in the national romantic frame, even during the hard communist time. So they celebrate the key engineers they were proud of, the ordinary workers were referring to them, who had some background, I don't know, in pre-war Poland, maybe their families had some connections with, I don't know, university in Vilnius or Lviv or something like that, and then that they kind of represented continuity of this Polish, national way of doing things, I don't know, so I think this romantic national myths were circulating very strongly in a socialist, higher education, technical education. This would be my hypothesis, because this is not the anthropological constant that this national feeling was there so strongly in industry. I don't know how to explain it differently, but maybe if you find another.
That's a great point, and I'm giving the mic to Joanna, but I forgot to answer your question. I will answer now just in 2 sentences. So, the Lithuanians are also super nationalistic. They just have different sources of the nationalism and banal nationalism and so on. So that's the thing. Yeah, you have your.
I will try to be brief. So. So about the method, there is a bit of pickle with the studies on trauma, that different methodologies research what they call the same, and like trauma studies are literary studies. It is under the wings of sociology, history, psychology, and psychiatry, and sometimes they collide. Within psychology, we have psychoanalytical approach, other approaches to trauma. It is one big kind of task for me to choose a certain methodology I use and stick to that. Going around this topic and going too much into the existing sources in literature or in film, that would, I think, diverge my project too much. So I will try to stick really to this already big amount of material that has been published on the the articles which are really dealing with this project of psychiatric studies in Krakow. I will even just signalize when it impacts, and it impacts greatly, other studies in Poland. But I will I will center myself in this really in Krakow and what they published. And to that, I would like to study the self-description that was the project of questionnaires that was launched by the same group, by the same team. These are my sources. Then there is, of course, a question, because survivors, they are describing the whole kind of state, their life after the war. They talk about their work, they talk about their political problems they face. Also there is a big aspect of, and big question, how they react to what is happening around Auschwitz, how if they go to Auschwitz, if they come back, if they if they watch television when there are different programs and films about Auschwitz, if they listen to radio emissions on that. So they respond to that. For some of them, it's just obsession. They would go very often to the place. They would try to really hear every information, every interpretation possible. Some try to shut their eyes, shut their ears, and live their life, but it's not possible. It turns out not to be possible. And the way they actually, of course, explain their experience, this is not crude. This is filtered always by the means of interpretation they had. So it's very difficult to stay within really this medical realm. And the authors in the journals, they didn't do that neither. They were, of course, that's the whole thing, that they are staying within the ways of interpreting trauma that was available to them. They have certain limitations because of the country they lived in, but I would like to not to go too far from what is the source and what is their subjective experience. So it's what is the state of art in the medical studies, how they are a subject, and then they are an object of their own kind of interpretation and narrative. About their identity. Yes, this research was possible because they gathered themselves, they trusted themselves, they were not only examined by the other survivors, yet those others had a mandate from other ex-prisoners. So they kind of stay in their trusted circle. It's incredible how frank and sincere they are. Like, it seems to be no filter in the way they write about their experience. So in the really early 70s, they talk about their political problems or really personal. Yeah, it's very intimate. Yeah, what they admit. So it's really striking how much they trust this team. But for the question of Jewishness, as I said, I think one or two of the psychiatrists that I'm interested, they are Shoah survivors, but no one defines themselves so, or predominantly, until the early 90s, actually, late 80s, when Maria Orvid, whom I mentioned, and who is Shoah survivor, not concentration camp survivor herself, she launches those first studies. And then she and her colleagues, they report that there is a huge kind of backlash and fear, even aggression. Why you touch it? Why? After 68, after 40s, there is a lot of distrust, and those studies in Poland, they are really here there is a trust issue, and probably the same people who are among those sources, they. Because of political climate, because of the Soviet idea that Shoah survivors can be treated under the same umbrella as other survivors and heroes, especially. This is what you all know better than me, because I did not study this topic. Because of that, this category of being Jew doesn't emerge, and it's interesting to observe, and yet shows the level of repression of this topic. Yeah, she starts in the 80s. Yes. And then, like, the fact that some people among the patients that they are Jews, it is mentioned. It's not like a taboo, but it's kind of not, how you call it, not stated. It doesn't kind of not considered as like a special category, which is pretty like incredible to observe from our point of view, but understandable if we know like what you published about it. Still, in Izbowit, they also were not as Jews; they were as concentration camp survivors. Yeah. Yes. So I think I quickly responded.
Okay, but We have to, just, I'm overdoing a bit, but well, this is so important, your topic, so let me ask you only two very quick questions. So the first question is about Viktor Frankl and the influence of his concept of Shoah or Holocaust as a universal human experience in extreme situation. When did it get to the Polish psychiatry? And the second question, you were talking about the turn in 1958 or after the wars in the Polish psychiatry. But I just wondered to what extent this turn was caused also by the environment of the Polish psychiatrists, and I mean Jan Dąbrowski and his concept of humanist psychiatry, which was a kind of the reaction, so anti the concept to what the Soviet psychiatry developed before.
Yes, thank you for this question. So I think, like in Frankl, there are two major kind of pillars of his work, and one is more relevant for me than the other one. Same with I quoted Primo Levi, and like all of those like great intellectuals that affected, influenced, and shaped the kind of human aspect of being a survivor. They, to an extent, but for Frankl, they mainly concentrate on the questions like how human being could survive the camp. So in a way, they are immersed in the reality of the camp, which I do not have I'm not brave enough to go into that, because a lot has been written and by people who survived it and who gave their accounts, which will, yeah, I don't think there is a need to go back to that, although there are such attempts. Like I think it's more relevant now for someone with more humble ideas to go to the life after. And Frank has this whole theory of the therapy, which is like what is interesting, pretty much dismissed by Kępiński, and yeah, and he has this humanistic approach. He treats like okay, not like we know more or less what Frankl was proposing, and I have on the back of my mind his ideas of how to heal, and yeah, but for Kępiński, I think it's not even an attempt to conduct a therapy on his patients. It's more like it's dialogue. It's extremely like a partner related, kind of centered discussion, conversation, account. And what he writes is that that sitting in front of the concentration camp survival, you are like in a very special situation, because in his interpretation, those people didn't wear masks because they were in their life confronted with such sort of a hell that they wouldn't accept it. So the kind of relationship was raw, was not kind of fogged by the masks, by a persona that people take in order to, and then the role of psychiatrists is to kind of peel those masks, and he didn't see it in the contact with the survivors. So it was more, yeah, it was more a dialogue rather, and it's a bit striking that they do not try really to come up with a specific therapy. But they use like pretty like modern ways of conducting research, of diagnosing, that is completely up to date. Frank, he publishes immediately after the war. Of course, they don't write about it then because they start in the 60s, but they are totally aware about what is happening. This was also striking because I thought they would have less possibility to access those writings of different kinds. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So in Germany we have always the last comment and the very last comment also. Sorry that I'm keeping you a bit longer, but it has also to do with the situation with our catering, which got in a huge traffic congestion. So we have 15 minutes of delay with the lunch. And so, yeah, the very last comment from you.
It's not comment, it's a question. It's very, very easy. To Joanna Urbanek. I know some of the articles from Przegląd Lekarski, Oświęcim, and what struck me when I was reading it, trying to get some general picture of this research, it was so kind of detailed, kind of dense, and kind of inconclusive, because they a lot of okay, let's say about smoking in the camp. They would conclude some started smoking, some stopped smoking, some continued smoking, with some percentage of answers from the questionnaires, big numbers, because they conducted a lot of, a lot of people responded to, and so on and so on. This is just, and then mixing, different into bigger, and of course there were some points where they were producing kind of clear knowledge, but usually on one hand it was very positivistic, very sharp science in a way. On the other, with the ambiguous conclusions, and then and a lot of pages, each number hundreds of pages, and then when you get every year such a big number of pages, a lot of detailed text with so many numbers, and then you can kind of, you read it, you see it's very serious. It's also seriously done science of that time, but then you don't really know what to do with that. Even as a scholar today, how to quote it, how to integrate into your story of different kind, because no one writes that way in sociology, history, or similar memory studies. And then maybe they had the same problem in transferring this into, apart from all the problems with Aaron Carton and then the linguistic problems, how to communicate that kind of detailed knowledge and seriously done knowledge of concrete people into to foreigners who hardly, I guess, understand that level of details. And then on the other hand, you have essays of Kępiński, who is a writer, who writes freely. Without caring about numbers. It's very emotional, it's very good written, with a lot of also ambivalence, philosophical, or even kind of quasi-theological thinking. How to combine all that together, plus all these personal ties beyond that you don't see in the text, but there are there. So it's kind of, again, kind of, I would say, for this category, but kind of national product of Polish survivors, plus Krakow spirit to it, plus some other issues.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. So, because it's not even about the situation after liberation, but there is this like huge part about life in the camp, like many other topics, and also memoirs, which is pretty like awkward in medical journal, but which comes from what you expressed. So a certain idea to not only be to do research and commemorate, and also, I don't know, a certain way of being together. So those three things, but those memories I wouldn't take into account in my study here. I would omit it. But like what you're saying, it might be one of the reasons why they didn't manage to communicate well, because I find that many of those articles are very conclusive. They bring innovative observations. Maybe with Cassette syndrome, I found it kind of hard to find the one article that was pinning it, because Kępiński, as you said, he was the writer, so he wouldn't publish himself scientific studies. He would do, I don't know, kind of like philosophical, like a bit like Frankl, yeah, in a way of writing. But like we need to understand that the psychiatry of that time, like there is this like hard scientific component to it, and there is certain amount of like free associations, also within the diagnosis. So they throw here like certain autism, certain psychosis to people who don't have autism, don't have psychosis, but it like helps them to kind of grasp something and explain something. But this is how psychiatry is. And if we look at the sources from the 20s and 30s, that's even more insane, because there is such a like a variety of different, even what we call trauma. There is such a mess in terminology. It's incredible to pin what the authors are talking about. So there are at least like 15 terms for trauma in the 20s, 30s, and then still in the 60s, like this like biological elements to it kind of linger still. So in the 20s and 30s, there was an idea that what we call today PTSD was coming from the neurological problems, or even people who were like more like kind of weak psychologically. So there was this odium, there was this kind of judgmental element to it. So in the German studies, it is called Rentenneurose, so people who want to get pension after political changes in Germany, that it was possible for the workers, and that's why they developed those symptoms. Yeah. So there is this fight between biological, between judgmental, and psychological. And what is happening after Auschwitz, it becomes not possible suddenly to judge people because it's obvious that they lived through hell. And this is one of the big impact of World War II on those studies. But on the other hand, this kind of like certain mess in terminology stays until the 80s, and this is not just limited to Kępiński. I think it's how it was, and I think still is with trauma research today.
Thank you.